What is going on, everyone? Welcome into Bayou Bengals football. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the LSU-Florida State game upcoming. So the more and more I look at LSU last year, and I'm thinking LSU did not really release. LSU is ready and primed to release their full arsenal against Florida State. And, the more I watch the game, credit to Florida State. Florida State did play better, did outplay LSU in that game. If there wasn't, I forget some of the mistakes made late in that game. Like, if you look at that game, you go, Florida State really, like that fumble, like if Florida State doesn't fumble there, field goal really puts that game kind of out of reach, you would feel like. So, to me, that was a game that Florida State really was kind of choking away at the end. I kind of want to retract. To me, from what my initial memory was, I thought that it was more of an even match game, but Florida State really more so took that game from Florida State. So, Florida State Florida State kind of let LSU back in that game. So I think that this year LSU, I've touched on that game kind of was more kind of resembled an Ed Orgeron LSU team towards the end of Ed Orgeron's career when he was struggling. I think this year is going to resemble more of the Brian Kelly LSU team. And what I mean by that is it's going to look similar to the Purdue game. Maybe not in the result, but LSU is going to take on the full identity of a Brian Kelly coach football team. I think they're going to execute at a higher level this year. They're going to have more of his recruits, more of his transfers. It's going to be a combination of, I think, really the full vision he has for this program. I think, and look at their stars. It's year 2 of experience for some of his stars. Will Campbell, Mason Taylor. I think that's to me. I haven't studied Florida State as deeply as LSU, but to me, Florida State, they really, like, even if you say they have gotten better this year, to me, they are a team that you really would just start really curious to see how they gel. Like, with LSU, there's a lot more sure things Like, LSU's offensive line is going to be good. The question is, can they be elite? Like, maybe the number 1, number 2, 3 offensive line in the country. That's the main question with the LSU's offensive line. It's not a question if they're going to be good. With Florida State, like, how does this offense come together? Like, it's one thing to have really good skill position really good players on offense, but how does this come together as a whole? Like, if you want, like, 2016 Florida State and 2015 Florida State, like, they had a good strong team, or they had really good players, even a couple of elite players, but they didn't really gel necessarily super well as a team, and you saw up and down play. So I guess that's the case for, I had to take what if LSU blowing out Florida State. What if this is what if Florida State has a good year, but this is one of their, kind of their down games? To me, is Florida State kind of like more resemble LSU last year? Are they a team where, to me, this is a year where they're not quite taking on the identity of a Mike Norvell coach team? And I guess I don't really know what that is necessarily. I think they've established that a little bit, what they want to be under Mike Norvell. I think they are. It's a competitive, high energy type of identity, I think. But have they fully established that? Maybe not as of yet. I think LSU is really. I think this could be the case for this game being a blowout. Is maybe this is the game where LSU puts everything together and they really take on the full identity of Brian Kelly. I think the Purdue game was kind of a glimpse, maybe not the full picture, but a glimpse of what LSU could be with all things clicking. But yeah, LSU, Florida State, super excited. I forgot that game is Sunday night on ABC and ESPN. So going to be the main event and the big primetime game. It's going to be super fun. Assume I'd like to have Herb Street and is it Herb Street and Fowler call the game, but I'm not sure exactly who's going to do it. I think last year was Tessitore and McElroy. So I would like to hear Herb Street and Fowler on the call. I think that would really add to and really give it a really big time game feel. But yeah, looking at LSU, the more I look at LSU's running backs, the more Josh Williams to me I think is the guy. Josh Williams has a really good skill set. I think Williams to me is a guy that, like I touched on, he's a guy that you watch him throughout the course of a season. Like if you just broke down Josh Williams' tape from this past year, I know he's a guy that's been at LSU for a while. You go, this is a guy he's a good football player. There's some good traits about his game. You like the ability that he can run with some power. You like that he can fall forward consistently. You like that he's got good hands. There's a lot to like about him, but to me, he's a guy that at a big-time program like LSU, Alabama, you're always trying to replace it. And I don't mean that as a shot at him, but to me, it seems like LSU and Alabama and Oklahoma, they always want a really good elite running back. And to me, Josh Williams is not that really good elite running back, but he does have that just a good all-around skill set. And just, I guess the best way to put it, he just seems like he's a reliable guy, truly a guy you can count on to get you positive yardage. He's got better vision than I thought. He's got fairly good burst out of his cuts too. So, and yeah, does a good job of he's agile, does a good job of making himself skinny when he's running through lanes. So, yeah, Josh Williams, a talented running back for LSU, and I expect him to start the game against Florida State. Whether they turn to Noah Diggs, Goodwin, if Josh Williams isn't running at full force, will be interesting. But to me, if they really establish the run early against Florida State and Williams is on, you got to believe that they're just going to stick with him in that game. So yeah, Josh Williams certainly is even though he's not going to most likely be like a true impact player in that game, he certainly is. If ABC is the ABC that does the Chick-fil-A impact players to watch, it might be CBS. If they do the Chick-fil-A impact players to watch, or players to watch, I should say. I don't know if they call it impact players, but Josh Williams certainly a guy to watch because LSU could try to establish the run early in this game. But yeah, I think with Mason Smith back this year, does that become, Mason Smith, like you feel like when I watched the LSU Florida State game last year, I'm thinking it kind of had the feel when Mason Smith went out of that game, Florida State started to really believe they could win. Not to say they didn't think they could win that game, but I think they really started to believe, and they really loosened up. Like you saw, their first touchdown was a trick play on 2nd and 12 for a touchdown pass that LSU was called for pass interference. I think that, Mason Smith, it sounds like I'm making more excuses, but you got to give credit to Florida State for executing. To me, when Mason Smith goes down, that to me, the more you watch the highlights in that full game, to me that is that's almost exactly what Florida State needed. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful because what Mason Smith getting injured sucks, but to me, him going down really benefited, or I shouldn't say, to me, him going down really really swung an advantage for Florida State because now the line of scrimmage at that point was, you could say, I would say Florida State had the edge in the line of scrimmage, but you could say at very least it was even. And when the line of scrimmage is even, then it comes down to the skill position players making plays. And Florida State did that. They, Mekhi Gardner, Converse, some of their corners who, they got them in the transfer portal. They were solid for them, but they were not elite guys who could consistently make plays on the ball in one-on-one coverage. And you saw Florida State make some plays. And you saw that the run defense was not as disruptive with Mason Smith. So to me, Mason Smith, with the hunger of not playing next year, and him, I'm sure him knowing and watching that, and if he goes back and watch that tape, I know he realizes that this year, if he creates havoc, that is really going to have an effect on Florida State to stretch the field vertically. And not only that, the other case for LSU beating Florida State is now we're improved at corner. So now we're going to have that dominant run pass rush ability. We're going to have better guys on the edge. and we have better corners. Cy Alexander, experienced corners that are likely going to win, are going to at least jar some pass breakups on some of those 50-50 balls. So to me, those are just kind of more reasons why LSU could win this game. But yeah, I'm hoping for. So I was listening to Greg Penn being interviewed now, and Greg Penn's a guy who needs to have a good season this year. He seems like a guy who's kind of he's kind of in the same boat with Josh Williams, a guy that seems like they kind of just want to move on from. Not necessarily move on from, but it seems like a guy that they kind of want to replace a little bit. You know, Omar Spates. Omar Spates is kind of the new guy on the block that they're excited about. Harold Perkins really made his impact last year. Those are the two guys getting the most buzz at linebacker. But Greg Penn, still a capable guy, played quite a bit of football, started all 14 games last year. So keep an eye on Greg Penn. You know, Greg Penn, to me, is a guy who, you know, if Spates and Perkins are the main guys at linebacker, when Penn gets into the game, he's going to be hungry. And he said something along the lines of, you know, one of his teammates, I don't know if it was at LSU or high school, getting benched. You know, sometimes getting benched can be the best thing for you. And I don't even know exactly, you know, Penn could start, but if he doesn't, you know, that's really going to motivate him a lot. And I think he knows that. He needs to play a little bit better. You've seen what he's doing with his body. He's dropped some weight. He's referred to by his teammate as one of the most improved guys. So like I've touched on this before in prior episodes, keep an eye on Greg Penn this year. But yeah, I think it's funny, you know, I guess it's interesting that you look at Notre Dame fans and they think, you know, Notre Dame fans, I don't think really appreciated Brian Kelly like they should have. If you look at Brian Kelly's career, you know, this is a guy who Notre Dame, the way his career unfolded at Notre Dame kind of like if you could predict if you knew he was going to coach, how long was he at Notre Dame? From 2010 to 2021? Was he 10, 11 years at Notre Dame? So if you said that he was going to be there 11 years and you kind of you'd looked at how he had done prior to that at Cincinnati, Grand Valley, Central Michigan, the success he had, you probably could have, and you knew he was going to coach 11 years, so you knew he was going to have some successful seasons. You might not have really even thought he was going to do as well as he did. Now, you take away the one season where they went 4-8, they were most years a really good football team. At the very least, a good football team, a solid football team. 8-5, 10-3, 12-1, with the loss to an Alabama team that had won back-to-back national titles, a team that they were really, outmatched talent-wise. So, to me, Brian Kelly, it's kind of a shame that Notre Dame fans really don't appreciate Brian Kelly. To me, I guess we're going to use analogies here. To me, Brian Kelly has how people say it, the chance to really win the breakup. And I think that LSU, to me, Marcus Freeman can still be a really good coach at Notre Dame, but I think a lot of Notre Dame fans, I feel like the ones that are on the extreme side that Brian Kelly was the kind of the main issue why they couldn't win a national championship. I don't think you'll ever convince them because they're so far. But you feel like if you get the 50-50, 60-40 Notre Dame fans that believe that they're 50-50 in the sense that they think part of it was Brian Kelly's fault. I think if LSU wins it all, they will be fully back to believing that it's just, that the Midwest just is struggling to recruit and that Notre Dame's a harder place to win kind of realization, as opposed to them believing that, it was Brian Kelly's fault why, Notre Dame couldn't get it done and win in the playoffs, win a national title. So yeah, I guess, to me, I think the main point I'm trying to get at is Notre Dame fans, I think will gain more of appreciation for Brian Kelly this year. even if they don't win the national title, even if they do win the SEC, have another really nice, 11-2, 10-2 type of season, I think you'll see a lot of those the kind of middle, the 50-50 Notre Dame fans who think 50% of it was Brian Kelly's fault, 50% was just how tough it is to win in the Midwest. It's been 2014 since a Midwest team has won a national title, so. I've just really appreciated, what Brian Kelly's done, and to me, I think it was the best hire for LSU. What's funny is they initially wanted Mel Tucker. Now, I'm sure, myself included, I'm sure there's a lot of LSU fans that are glad they didn't get Mel Tucker. Now, Mel Tucker, he could have had a lot of success at LSU. Let's be honest. This guy could really recruit. I think how Mel Tucker would have done at LSU is very interesting. Now, you would say, based on the way Michigan State performed this past season, you have evidence to believe that it would not go well. But if you saw the way it went in 2021, Mel Tucker at Michigan State, when he landed a transfer running back and all things were clicking as far as the run game and the rhythm of the offense, then you would say, with that evidence, if Mel Tucker could recruit more guys, obviously you're not going to get a running back like Kenneth Walker, but if you can recruit, land maybe a couple guys like that at other positions, and he can recruit guys like he did at Georgia, like the Mecole Hardman, the Tyson Campbells that he got at Georgia, if you can combine that level of play they had in 2021 with the recruiting he had at Georgia, which he was recruiting at a high level at Georgia, then that would be the case for Mel Tucker to have success there. But yeah, I think that, even if you want to argue that Brian Kelly's not an elite coach, like if you want to say that he'll never be Nick Saban, he'll never be Kirby Smart, he'll never be Urban Meyer, to me, and I've kind of made this point before, to me, with the superior talent LSU's had 2019, 2011, LSU's going to have these years with recruiting, especially if they continue to land top 5 to 8 classes, that there's going to be years where things all come together. I think that's my main argument for why Brian Kelly's going to win a national title at LSU, because there's just going to be a year, and it might not be this year, it might not be next year, it might not be the year after that, but I feel like, I guess if he doesn't do it in those years, you could argue that, maybe they move on from him, but also, if he's winning SEC titles, which they were close to last year, then you got to believe that he should have, like if they win the SEC, you got to believe that he will be the coach there in the 3 years from now. He would be the coach there in the 2026 season, 2025 season. So to me, you have to believe that Brian Kelly, one of these years, all things are going to come together. And I think, to me, them landing Harold Perkins was kind of I feel like that was the ultimate stamp saying that Brian Kelly could recruit at a really high level here. I think the biggest statements were Harold Perkins, Will Campbell, and then this year Zealand's hurt. I think those were the three statements Brian Kelly has really made in recruiting. Now he's made more, but those are the three biggest ones. And why I say that is, to me, landing Harold Perkins shows that, okay, you're competing. You get a guy out of Texas. You're competing with Texas, Texas A&M, Alabama. You can go get a guy not from your home state that's an elite difference maker, a guy with an NFL skill set. And then not only that, you can go and get guys that are true difference makers, SEC caliber, physical, offensive linemen, and continue to build the trenches, not just on the same level as you did at Notre Dame, but even at a higher level. So to me, those are statements. Those are the ultimate statements as far as recruiting goes, and making people know that you can do something special and that you can land elite talent. So I think those were really exciting gets in recruiting. Harold Perkins, I mean, obviously a superstar. Will Campbell, that's before, I wasn't covering LSU super closely, a year ago when they've landed those guys, Will Campbell and Harold Perkins. But to me, I kind of just go and look at teams' top recruiting, recruits that they've landed, and I'm thinking, this is before the season started. This is before this past year and this year, and I'm thinking, I'm going to look at the recruiting class, and the one thing Brian Kelly needs to make an emphasis is get SEC caliber size, physicality, and high-end talent on the offensive line. That's going to be the key for him to win a national title at LSU. And he does that. Will Campbell, Zealand's Hurd, even DJ Chester this year. So to me, those are just statements that Brian Kelly, those are arguably bigger statements than them beating Alabama year one. Because to me, that goes to show that Brian Kelly is serious about addressing the main issue at Notre Dame. If you saw if you rewinded, I know this is going back a long time. If you rewinded to that 2012 Alabama-Notre Dame game, Alabama was a superior team in almost every position. I think Brian Kelly understood that. And no matter how he improved, what's crazy about Brian Kelly is their recruiting was pretty good. I don't remember exactly where they were ranked when he first, his first few years at Notre Dame. I think they were like in the 15 to 20 range. But if you remember, they started to get even better. Like they landed Jalen Smith. Kind of reminds me of the way they landed Harold Perkins. Because Jalen Smith was the number one linebacker, freak athlete, NFL skill set. Now he got hurt, so he didn't really get to see that full skill set on display, but that's beside the point. He started to improve at Notre Dame, but you feel like he was kind of hitting the ceiling there. And then I think to defend Notre Dame fans that say Brian Kelly was a problem, you saw Marcus Freeman. He's come in and, maybe is kind of kept the recruiting at the same level, but maybe took it to a slightly higher level. Now we'll see how it plays out because some of those guys are young guys, just going to be freshmen and sophomores. But to me, Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, even with the improvements in recruiting at Notre Dame, you feel like he was just kind of just scratching for more. And, LSU was the ultimate place where he can just, he really could push for more. So, yeah, it's going to be fun, exciting to see. It's going to be, I'm interested just to watch Brian Kelly on the sidelines this year. I think, I don't want to say there's doubt in him, but I think he knows that this team's capable of doing something special. I think that he needs, I don't know if he's a true believer. I think he needs to see a few games. And I think that stretch where Florida State, Grambling, and then the three SEC opponents, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Arkansas, I think that stretch, if LSU stays healthy, play at a high level, they go 5-0 in that. I think if they they go 5-0 in that stretch, stay healthy. I think that's when Brian Kelly will truly be believing that this team can do something special. But to me, I don't think he is a skeptic of his own team. But you got to believe that he's been in this business a long time and he understands how important depth is. Now their depth is improved, but their depth still is a little thin at some positions, and it's always a worry. But yeah, for example, if LSU wins it all this year, you have to. I think that's why he's concerned because I always kind of try to peek into the future and do these what if scenarios. But so if you peeked into the future and you saw LSU wins the national title this year, I think you would assume it's fair to assume that LSU stayed fully healthy. For the most part. Obviously, you'll have a few guys banged up. Maybe a star guy misses a game here and there. But you would assume that they avoided any catastrophic injuries. So I think that's really. I think that's an interesting kind of view into the future. And I think that's a safe prediction to make, honestly, that they, avoided major injuries, avoided, missing guys, key guys for multiple games. Jane Daniels was fully healthy. He had, as good of season, a better season. I think those are a lot of things you can assume if they do win it all. I think that's that goes with Brian Kelly's concern, because if they don't win it all, and they don't win it all, or they don't win the SEC, you got to believe that there was injuries along the way, because with their talent, there's no reason why. You feel like with their talent, what they've done, the coaches returning, you feel like the floor of this team is the SEC championship game. Now, that sounds like I'm getting too, I'm setting the bar like I'm setting the bar too high. But you got to think that, getting to the SEC title game is really, it's hard, but it's nowhere near as hard as winning it, getting to the playoff and winning the national title. Those are next steps within themselves. Like, look at Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. He won the conference title multiple times, got to the playoff. That was a different story. Brian Kelly in Notre Dame, getting to the playoff becomes a whole new ball game. Winning, losing one game in the regular season, winning a conference title is one thing. Winning games in the playoff, winning a national title, that's a whole different animal in itself. So, to me, that may be an overly optimistic LSU fan, but I think the floor is an SEC championship appearance in a West division. But even that's going to be easier said than done against Alabama. Or they have to go through Alabama most likely. I know they could lose to Alabama technically, but then in that case, Alabama would have to lose multiple games. So, yeah. But, yeah, for prop bets in the LSU-Florida State game, I would say Malik Neighbors, I would take the over on whatever his receiving total is. You got to believe that 2 muff punts, that's something I forgot when you go back and watch the Florida State game. I forgot that Malik Neighbors had 2 muff punts in that game. Now, I think that the odds of that are very unlikely, but that goes into, I think he's going to be even more so motivated this year. Like, that had to leave a really sour taste in his mouth walking away from that game, because he knew that, like that second one, he knew that was just obviously it's a critical mistake, but he knew he should have caught the ball. Like, I guess I don't know the best way to articulate what he was thinking, but to me, I think he knew he had to be better, and I think he knew that he's a guy who, his skill set is a supreme one, and he's got an NFL future. So, to me, a poor performance in that game is really going to motivate him this year. And I think LSU, they're going to make an emphasis to get guys like him the ball this year in space in different ways. I think Aaron Anderson's another interesting guy to watch in this game, but I think Malik Neighbors, he may not be the guy in this game, but Malik Neighbors is a guy I would be keying on to really have a big game in this one. So I don't know if the prop bets are out yet, but yeah, I would take a hard look at that one. I think, an Aaron Anderson anytime touchdown would be interesting. I think Josh Williams would be, I don't know. I would go contrarian. I guess that's so hard to predict. You might want to stay away from betting LSU running backs just because they have such a deep room. I might go contrarian and I'd go Noah Cain to have a big game against Florida State. I would say that, I think Josh Williams, I think he obviously could start out hot and kind of be the main man in that game, but in a game, that game and the physicality that game probably will have, to me, I think Noah Cain will be a likely candidate to have a really good game. I think Noah Cain really embodies that physical running style, so keep an eye on Noah Cain. I think that he's a guy that could be a candidate to have a really nice game in that one and likely find the end zone. But, I was thinking on my way home from the gym in the car, I was thinking about what if this game is like a total defensive struggle. That's something no one's really talked about. Could this game be a really a tough defensive battle? Could this be like a 13-17, 13-10 type of game? I kind of have the score, like a score 13-17 in my head. Now, to me, I have that score in my head, but I just feel like I keep naming, guys having an impact in that game, like Josh Williams, Noah Kane. Like, I feel like if LSU playmakers, like if multiple really shine in that game, you got to believe LSU is going to score more than 17 points. Maybe not, but also I think that is a strong case for why they could score more than that. On the Florida State side, Johnny Wilson, to me, I think Johnny Wilson would be interesting. I'm not sure what his bets will be, but Trey Benson too. Trey Benson, I think this game really embodies his running style. He's a physical break tackle guy. I think him versus the LSU defense will be a fascinating battle. I think that'll be a physical, tough matchup every time he runs between the tackles. I think you're going to see some hitting in this game. I think this will be one of the more passionate games, and hopefully this, to me, there's a lot of Week 1 games in the past, in the recent history. Well, I say fairly recent history of college football, that the Week 1 games are really most memorable. Now, a lot of times people remember the beginning and end stages of things. So early college football games, people tend to remember more. It's like if you start a job, you tend to remember like kind of the first few days of the job. That's, to me, like this kind of has that feel like if it's a good game, passionate game, back and forth, kind of similar to last year, and it has implications as far as the national title is concerned. You get the feel that this will be a game that people really talk about as that we get into the middle end of the season, not just because the LSU or Florida State is in the mix for a national title, but just because one of the more memorable games and a really pivotal game for as far as keeping college football fans satisfied and really craving games like this. This is a game that college football fans really want. If you think about it, these are the matchups they really want to see. LSU, Florida State, traditional teams, Power 5 teams that recruit at a high level, teams that are that are well coached. These are the games everyone wants to see. Now, you see all this conference realignment. These are matchups like this, I think, are what get people excited the most about conference realignment. But yeah, so I know this is the LSU channel, but yeah, I'm going to think of some more keys for Florida State to win this game. I think Jordan Travis has got to take care of the ball. I think they cannot afford turnover. He needs to have a game like last year, turnover free, play within the offense, make some plays, roll out. I think he's going to have to roll out and make some throws. I think the Florida State secondary is big because I think they're going to be in for more of a challenge than they expected. Now, because Kayshon Boutte was the main guy last year. He was underwhelming in that game. Malik Neighbors didn't have his best game. You look at guys, and then Jerry Jenkins, Brian Thomas. Jerry Jenkins played pretty well, but Jenkins no longer there. Brian Thomas, a guy who I don't think he's not doesn't pose a huge threat to defenses necessarily, but I think that with the upside Hilton, Lacey, Malik Neighbors have, I think if you're Mike Norvell in Florida State, you're really going to have to challenge your corners in this football game. So I think the LSU wide receivers versus the Florida State corners will be a fascinating matchup in this football game. But yeah, so I was listening to, I like listening to the LSU players' interviews over again. When I listen to Deuce Chestnut, I really like the passion he plays for. I think it's cool to me that Deuce Chestnut really enjoys being an LSU Tiger, and really, this is a school he wanted to go to. I think that's really cool, and it's exciting to see a guy who didn't get the opportunity to play for LSU right away, but still earned that opportunity. To me, that really excites me as a coach, that you get to coach a guy that has a passion for LSU football, has a love, a passion for LSU football, and a guy that can bring some upside to your football team and help you improve in an area that you need improved at. So I think landing Deuce Chestnut really checks off all the boxes, exactly what they were looking for in a transfer. Sounds like a guy that just really loves football, says he's always watching football, and I think says he's a fan of Jair Alexander, was a fan of Tyrann Mathieu. So it's interesting to see that Tyrann Mathieu, that elite secondary from 2010, 2011, guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Morris Claiborne, even Eric Reed. I know Eric Reed was more so 2012, but it's cool to see those guys still having an impact in getting recruits and getting transfers up until this point. So, yeah, Deuce Chestnut, a guy that's got a bright future for LSU, and by future I mean likely starting this year because he's likely going to get the starting nod. They need him to, I would tell. If Brian Kelly gets a chance to sit down, I'm sure he has sat down with Deuce Chestnut one-on-one. I'm not sure, obviously, what he told him, but I would tell him this, that, we know you have a passion or excited to be here, anxious to make big plays. You've shown good things in camp, but we need you to just, not let the moment get too big, not play out of control, play within yourself. I think playing within himself was key for Deuce Chestnut. This is a guy who excels in zone coverage, excels at recognizing screens, running up, making tackles, enough burst to run by blockers and make tackles. So to me, I would tell him that, those are the things you do well. We need you to do those things well. We need you to do those things consistently. We're not going to ask you to play man-to-man every play, shut down an opponent's best receiver. Like when they play Florida State, I think it's asking Chestnut a lot to cover Johnny Wilson or Keon Coleman man-to-man the whole game. But when you are man-to-man, can you make some plays for us? And when you're in zone coverage, can you really thrive at recognizing plays, making tackles, giving everything you have? Can you do those things well in zone coverage? Can you play well enough for us in man-to-man? I think those are the key things Deuce Chestnut needs to have in that game. But yeah, he said, I think it's cool. He said good things about Zy Alexander, their other talented corner. And reporters always ask, and I think maybe some of the players questioned, I didn't really hear them specifically, but people always ask, the transition, Zy Alexander, it's going to be a tough transition from FCS football to Division I SEC football. But to me, people always pose that question, and it's never really becomes, the player never really lacks the ability. It's one of those things, that's kind of been the aha moment I've had as in scouting, is if a guy can do it, if a guy can do things, he can do it at the level above. Like Zy Alexander, you saw hip fluidity, change of direction, ability to go up and come down with jump balls, hands. All those things translate to any level of football. Like, it's not that if he goes to LSU, he's magically just gonna, like, those traits are gonna go down. Obviously he needs to be a little bit more his game needs to be a little bit more on point, more consistent at the SEC level. But obviously you don't need to, or he's not just going to magically get worse. So I think Zy Alexander does have a really good skill set that translates. And it was either Greg Penn or one of them, it's either Greg Penn or Chestnut saying that, Zy Alexander, he's came in and he's played like he belongs there. He doesn't play like a guy that was an FCS transfer. So I think that's really cool that he has come in and really made an emphasis to play at a high level. But yeah, the defensive line, all the transfers, I think, the transfer portal is always interesting how the team kind of mixes together, because before the transfer portal, you didn't really see too many transfers at one time. So with Paris Shand, Jordan Jefferson, how do they fit in? How is the rotation on the defensive line? I think it's gonna be fun to see. Paris Shand has a bright future, or has a potential to have a really good season. Paris Shand is what they need, because he's a guy who Brian Kelly touched on. We need some more guys off the end to win one-on-one. I think that's exactly Paris Shan's game, and he even brings that bonus stoutness stopping the run. So Paris Shan, a guy who can win one-on-one off the edge. He's got a strength, competitive toughness, and motor in his hands, and just all-around game that allows him to get off of blocks late. I think that's what I really like about this game. Can get around the guy. Avoids his pass rush stalling out. So I think that's really cool about Paris Shan. And Jordan Jefferson, really stout at the zero tech. Same with Jalen Lee. He's a guy that can play the zero tech. So you got really three guys that can excel in the zero tech, even play the 1-2 techniques, like Mekhi Wingdo, Jordan Jefferson, and Jalen Lee. Those are three guys that can really do a nice job at the zero tech and do have the ability to play the 1 tech as well. Yeah, I touched on Mekhi Wingdo, going to be one of the unsung heroes for LSU this year. I don't know, his name is kind of more so talked about now, but yeah, Mekhi Wingdo, a key piece to this team. If you look at, obviously LSU has the difference makers, we've named them, but Mekhi Wingdo has the skill set of a guy you really love to have. Just a good all-around player. Might not get drafted super high in the NFL, might not have a long, thriving career in the NFL, but a guy who I think is going to find a way to make things work in the NFL. Make some rosters, be a rotational guy, just be really solid and play a lot of snaps and play with a high level of competitive toughness. I think that's all the things that a lot of the things that Mekhi Wingdo really brings to the table. But yeah, Wingdo, they need to be really good this year, or they need him to be good because you're playing. This last year there was games he was playing a ton of snaps. This year with Mason Smith back, you hopefully. He stepped up his game with Mason Smith out. You hopefully he does not take any sort of a step back and relax. I don't think that's the kind of guy he has, but hopefully he doesn't relax too much now that Mason Smith's back. He knows that he needs to keep his game amped up and play at a high level and play as many snaps possible to help this football team. But yeah, I think, I think that the interesting question is, obviously we've touched on the hypothetical of if LSU wins it all this year, then you got to believe that. I think if Brian Kelly wins it all at LSU this year, then a lot of people will talk about maybe LSU just is the place to coach. Maybe it is one of the best jobs in the country as far as getting recruits, getting high-end NFL guys with high-end NFL potential. Being able to dominate your own state, getting guys that have a passion and want to be an LSU Tiger. So I think, with most coaches in recent history winning national championships at LSU, including the last two, maybe there's more and more talk about LSU just is that place to coach. Because if you look at Ed Orgeron and Les Miles, if you look at their track record prior to being at LSU, if you had to predict going into LSU that they would win a national title there, you feel like that would be hard to predict based on that evidence. I think that's the case for why Brian Kelly could even do a better job than Les Miles or Ed Orgeron, because he has a better track record than at this point right now. I know he's coached longer, but he has a better track record than both those guys at this point. So, yeah, I think strong case. I guess I went down this road. We talked about this earlier in this episode, but to me, a strong case for why Brian Kelly is going to win at least one national title here at LSU, and that would be the third coach in a row to do so, the third different coach to do so during his tenure. But yeah, I mean, for LSU, the offensive line, you hope that the offensive line can just play at a high level and sustain a high level of success throughout the year. if LSU's offensive line comes out and is elite against Florida State, you hope that they're just elite the rest of the season. Now they may have a few games where they're just good, they're very good, but you hope that they can be. If this is an elite offensive line, which it has the potential to be, you hope it's an elite offensive line the entire season. So I think that's what I'm really excited to see from LSU this year, is to see, number one, how good the offensive line is, and then if it is elite, can they be elite the entire season? So I think that's going to be super fun to watch, and hopefully you get guys like Will Campbell, Emory Jones take another step in their game. Miles Frazier, another guy too that I think someone mentioned on the LSU team. He just doesn't get a lot. He's kind of maybe the most forgotten about starter. Returning starter on this LSU team that just does not get a lot of buzz. A really nice player, a guy that's just played some high-end football the last couple seasons at guard for LSU, and a talented guy. Sounds like he works hard, is dedicated. So, yeah, Miles Frazier certainly a guy to watch too. Dellinger, Charles Turner. Is Charles Turner the starting center the whole year? Marlon Martinez, another guy I really like too. Does Martinez crack the starting lineup at all too? I think that's an interesting question. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of things to question with LSU, but a lot of question marks that are not necessarily questions and concerns, just mostly just questions. Mostly questions of how good. Not can we be good, and if so, do we need this and this to happen? It's a question of, yeah, well, the offensive line is going to be good, but how good? Can it be elite? So I think when you're asking those kind of questions, that's usually a recipe that there's something really special potentially brewing for LSU this year. But yeah, I think the offensive line, and then I think at quarterback, too, the floor of Jaden Daniels kind of really leaves you asking the question. Jaden Daniels is going to be good, but can he become very good? Can he become elite? It's like the point I made. There's kind of two paths Jaden Daniels could take at this point. Maybe he's just going to take a small step in one of the directions, but does he become more like Terrell Pryor, a guy that just a guy that kind of stays at his own skill set, kind of is almost still a more run-first type of guy, can make plays with his legs, but is not enough of a threat just as a scrambler where he can, win games? Or does he take a step towards Jalen Hurts, a guy that just continues to get better as a passer and just has improved his game and has become such a high-end leader, high-level competitor that he elevates the play of his team and he can win something special and he can get them, good enough to win a national title. So I think, a couple roads Jaden Daniels could take right now. And, the old quote is, you're either getting better or you're getting worse, as Bo Schembechler used to say. And it appears from what I've heard that Jaden Daniels is getting better. So hopefully he continues to move in the right direction. But yeah, Nussmeier too. You hopefully, even though Nussmeier is not the guy this year, you really hope for him in this LSU team and the program that he continues to be hungry to get better. Sounds like that's really right in his DNA. That he is a guy that's motivated to get better, be hungry, just get after it. So yeah. I'm looking forward to Garrett Nussmeier's season, and I think there's big things in store for this young man. So I'm going to wrap at that. Thanks for tuning in to Bayou Bengals Football. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.